Hello, my people, welcome back. And so for this last part of the video, we're gonna be going over ethics and a little bit of stats that goes with AP Psych. So just to get started, we do wanna do a little review on mode, median, and mean. And this is how we measure our data with their experiments, sorry. And so just to go through it, mode, the most frequently occurring score in a distribution, right? Mean is the average of the scores by adding all the scores together and dividing the amount of scores that were added. And the median, which is the middle score in the ranking order of the distribution. So a little review on mean, median, and mode. Usually in class, I would have people document their height in inches, and then we would work through what the classes mode, median, and mean is. So maybe we can do that during class one day to help you make sure you understand. Next, and again, this is just kind of a visual of how we measure the central tendency, right? So even though, so outliers can affect the mean, and the mode is, again, the most common. So here's just a little visual example of how these are working. And as we gain our random sample sizes, this is how we collect data, right? To find the averages and all that. So the measures of variation, again, following mean, median, and mode, we have range, right, which is the difference of the highest number to the lowest number. So if we had, the highest number being 10 and the lowest number being 4, our range would be 6, right? So in between the two. And then we have standard deviation, and this is just how we measure how much the scores vary across the mean, right? So comparing the average score, how many deviations away are you? Lucky for you guys, the AP test does not make you do math. It's just something to be aware of and kind of how bell curves and these measures of variations would be used in experiments. But if you want to major in psych, you will have to take stats in college. All right, so, and again, we use normal curve when we think about the bell curve. Describes the distribution. It shows how our data fits into the line of where the mean is and where the averages are and how far away. So these are the standard deviations, which is how far away it is from the mean. So if you have any outliers, it'd be further away from the mean. And again, you don't need to know too much about the math, but just know that these are ways that experiments are used, the way that data is taken with experiments as well. So making inferences, right, is a statistical statement of how frequently obtained results occur by experimental manipulation or by chance. And so what that means is it's going to be called like statistical significance. And it's essentially how likely is there a chance that these two variables do not connect, right? So there's, so for example, in the next where you talk about making inferences, what is the significant difference? So when does it matter? And what they say is that you want to keep your inference, your statistical significance. Here, let me. So you want to keep your statistical significance lower than 5%, right? And so what that means is when you give someone the placebo versus the treatment, and remember how we have many variables going on, what the statistical significance means is that there is less than a 5% chance that this is due to chance, right? So the lower the percentage, the closer you get to 0, the more likely the theory is concrete, right? So say that the statistical significance of taking a medication for blood pressure, right? And this medication will help the blood pressure. The statistical significance is like 2%. So they have a 2% chance that it could be due to other factors that it has changed, right? But the lower the chance, the more likely your study has worked, right? So if your statistical significance is like 50%, that means that there is 50% chance that your data is skewed due to other variables that you haven't accounted for, right? So again, statistical significance is, what is the likelihood that this was due to chance, right? So you want a lower percentage of this. So if you get less than 5%, so that means that you have a legit experiment that has happened that has shown very strong connections, right? All right. And then we're just going to talk a little bit about ethics. So, is it ethical to experiment on people? And yes, but there is rules that we have to follow, right? Because you can't just do anything, right? And some of the interesting things is that some of the best research that has happened has been from unfortunate circumstances or experiments that weren't necessarily legal. Well, they're not legal now, but they were, back in the day. So as we go through our chapters, it's going to be interesting to see what we learn from unfortunate circumstances that has happened, and also how we can't recreate certain things nowadays due to our ethic guidelines, right? And so experiments that do not involve any kind of physical or psychological harm, right? So again, physical or psychological, and beyond normal levels encountered in daily life, right? So you have limits. And the 4 things you need to remember are these. So these are the APA ethical guidelines. So again, American Psychological Association ethical guidelines. First, you have to have informed consent, right? You have to have written consent. And this is where a lot of animal rights come in, and how animals can't write their consent, and how things get tested on them. So that's where that controversy comes. You need to protect the subjects from harm when possible, hopefully at all times possible. You don't want to have injured people in your experiment, in your ethical guidelines. You have to have confidentiality. You can't be sharing your experiment around. It has to say confidential. And you are required to do a debrief afterwards, right? So you are required to sit down with all your participants and make sure that they are psychologically okay after, and that there's no lasting harm. So again, these are just a little bit of math just for you to know and to just kind of have in the back of your head, and some of the ethical guidelines. And that will wrap up the rest of our videos.